For landlords, by landlords. The Rent Perfect Podcast with David Pickron.
Well, here we are again, another episode of the Rent Perfect Podcast. Scott, I want to do a little bit something different, and I've talked to you about this last week.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while, I want to have a podcast where, first of all, let me tell our audience, we don't set these things up. We kind of take some phone calls from clients. We have maybe a really quick conversation while we're at the microphone before we start rolling, and we just go. So what you're getting is not a lot of, it's just by the gut. If I were to be asked questions on the street or by a client, what would I say? It's natural conversation. What first comes to my head, it's not calculated. So I challenged Scott last week. I said, Scott, just come up with a question. Don't tell me what it is, and just hit me on the podcast. And so if you're dealing with clients this week or you're dealing with someone, pose the question to me and let's have that podcast.
Sure.
So stump the expert, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. I feel like we're on that old Johnny Carson thing with Karnak where he puts the envelope to his head and does the thing.
So
anyway,
a lot of pressure on me right now because I don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
So I hope it's a good question and you give me
I think so. I mean, it's one of these things that's been on my mind as I'm transitioning out on one of my properties right now. So here's the question. As a seasoned expert in this industry, right, do you prefer a year lease or month to month? And especially given we're rolling into 2024, rates are what they are. People are doing what they're doing. There's maybe not a lot of turnover. Maybe there's more renters, less renters, whatever. So the question is, do you prefer a year lease or a month-to-month lease given our current climate?
Okay, so because you're saying given our current climate,
yes,
I will tell you that answer would change based on the market.
Yeah.
Okay. Right now, from what I'm seeing, reading, and even seeing it in my own portfolio, is rents are coming down.
Mm-hmm.
I sure loved the last 5-6 year run of rents going up, right? But the reality is rents are coming down a little bit. So I love to, first of all, start out with a year's, if on my long terms, a year's lease. I like to see that commitment because, when you turn a property, you probably have $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in it, right?
Right.
I don't want to be turning that property again in a year. Even though I sign a year's lease, my ultimate goal at the end is 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Right? So how can I keep them there? And sometimes I need to adjust the way I do business to keep people.
Sure.
Right? And so there's a lot of times where, and I think even a couple podcasts ago, we talked about keep the people you know. There are times where I love to adjust rent up or down based on market, what I can get. But my ultimate goal is when I think about my leases is I want to keep the people, right? So right now I will always start with a year's lease. In fact, in any market, I will always start with a year's lease for me personally. Now, you always hear me say 30 landlords in a room. There's 30 different ways to manage. Some people say, hey, I like to do month to month, and I like to get payment every 2 weeks. Some people have nice properties. Some people have, properties that don't take a lot of effort. Other people have properties in parts of town where they kind of do a little bit more babysitting than some of us others on portfolios. Sure. We have different strategies to get money out of people, when to get money out of people, how they handle their money. I mean, there's so many different things to think about. But in my portfolio, which is kind of middle of the road, single family home, decent neighborhoods, I like to start out with a year's lease, and then I like to roll month to month in most instances, even though we're going into this down market, because it's going to allow me to be flexible. Okay. Now, you would think, Dave, you're going into a down market. Wouldn't you want to lock somebody in at a high rate? Listen, I want them to stay there, right? Yeah. And the reality is I'm probably going to negotiate on a year's lease the same as I'm going to negotiate on a 30-day lease, month-to-month lease. I'm probably going to negotiate it the same way because my goal isn't so much as what kind of lease do I have. It's like I said, keeping the people. I don't mean to repeat myself there. So, yeah, I like to do a year's lease and then go 30 days going into this time because I might come back and say, hey, tenant that I really like, that's been there for 2 and 3 years, I'm going to back you off a couple $100 a month starting in 30 days from now. So it allows me to change my lease every 30 days, okay? Maybe they drop interest rates this year, this market takes off again, rental prices go back up, and I say, hey, I gave you that $200 break 3 months ago. I'm going to have to raise it back to $200. I mean, it just allows me to be flexible, and I think if I can be flexible, it allows me to keep my people. I always go back to this. If I'm doing a turn a year, I am losing money. If everybody just signs a year's lease, stays a year, and then leaves, I'm losing money. Because, you know, in the long-term market, you're lucky to get $300, $400, $500 a month profit, right?
Right.
That's $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a year. When you're spending $300, $400, $500 on a turn, and you have an air conditioning call or a heater or plumbing maintenance call, you're not cash flowing.
It's poof. It's all gone, right?
It's gone, right? It's gone. So I would say, you know, just if you're listening, you know your portfolio, you know how people operate in your portfolio, I would just make your portfolio flexible, and I would just focus on not so much what kind of lease I have other than just keeping the people.
Okay. Let me ask a follow-up question.
Okay.
So at what point do you, in that first year lease, do you start negotiating or communicating with your tenant on what the next 30 days or next 365 days looks like?
Okay. So in most states, if you let a years-long lease lapse, you automatically go into a month-to-month status. There's nothing you need to do, okay? Now, that means you have to give them, in most states, and check with your attorneys, you have to give them a 30-day notice saying you're going to change something in that lease. So 30-day notice, I'm going to raise the rent. 30-day notice, you need to move out. 30-day notice, you know, whatever I want to do, and it puts me in a more flexible position where I can make a change in 30 days versus waiting for a year. Now, also having everybody on a 30-day notice, and this just happened to my son, is he had a life-changing experience in his life where he needed to move into his rental. And if he would have had somebody on a year's lease, he wouldn't have had the option to move into the rental. He would have been having to go rent someplace, right? So he gave a 30-day notice, hey, you need to move out. He's had a life-changing, you know, experience that needed to put him back in one of his rentals. So it just creates flexibility based on, you know, on your life circumstances. So, yeah, you'll automatically go into, in most states, a month-to-month lease, you know. But I will say, if your tenant's fighting for another year's lease, if they're saying, oh, we want another year's lease, we don't want you to raise the rent, and they're fighting for it, I'd give it to them.
Yeah.
I'd give it to them. And then, especially in a market that's going down, and then when they say, man, you know, your lease, the rent's too high, you're the one who wanted
you negotiated
that lease,
that,
right?
Yeah,
so I would make sure and cater to what the tenant wanted to do at that point, because they're making a commitment to you to stay there and pay you the rent. And I think what's changed for me over the years when I was younger is I was in control, and I controlled the lease, and this is my property. And now I've realized, without my business partner, and that's why we started calling tenants business partners, without a good business partner, I'm not making a lot of money. So I'm actually listening a little bit more now in my older years to my tenants than I used to.
Right.
Now, I'm not becoming their friend. We're not, you know, going to dinner at night, and I'm not supplementing their rent or letting them get it. I mean, there's still a business relationship there, but I am listening to their needs a little bit more.
I love it.
Okay, answer.
Awesome. I love that answer. It's a great answer. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Scott. That was awesome. I appreciate it. I hope that answered that the correct way for you, or at least the way that you'd understand. And until next time, continue to rent perfect.